Well, joining us now is IDF Lieutenant Colonel Amnom Sheflet from the IDF International Spokesperson's Office. And Colonel Sheflet, thank you for joining us. First of all, let me just ask you about the situation in and around what you can tell us about the operations in and around Shifa Hospital, some reports about the IDF completing an operation, withdrawing troops, then a denial. What can you tell us about the state of those operations?
Thanks for having us. We are conducting a based intelligence operation that is targeted in a very precise area of the Shifa Hospital that we know that Hamas has been using. And that is what we also exposed today. We, again, saw the pictures of how arms are found next to an MRI machine and next to it more guns and other weapons and tools that are used by Hamas. Now, sadly, this is not the first time, as we have seen and as we have shared, and as also our American counterparts have affirmed, that this is the MO of Hamas. We saw this in the Rantisi hospital, and we saw this in the Al-Quds hospital, and we have seen how they use kindergartens, schools, and other civilian infrastructure to hide their terrorist activity.
Right. To talk about some of the operations, we saw reports where we had read footage of IDF troops actually bringing medical equipment into the hospital, and reports that the teams included, I'll report this correctly, unlike the BBC, Arabic speakers and medical professionals to interact with the medical staff that is there.
Exactly. Hospitals are, of course, a place that has a special protection, but sadly, Hamas has stripped it off from its special status. And yet, following our values and our rules of engagement, we do everything in order to safeguard the civilians and the patients that are still inside. And that is why we brought with us professional teams that speak Arabic, medics that can help. We brought in incubators from Israel that the babies can be dealt in the best way. And I remind you also that for many, many days, we have been calling civilians to evacuate from that area. We call the medical staff in the hospital to tell them, use the eastern side of the hospital to evacuate people that are not part of Hamas, and that's what we've been trying to do to safeguard those civilians and carry out the mission of stopping Hamas and dismantling it.
All right. Now, all this is happening in the northern Gaza Strip. In the southern part, of course, much of the population has evacuated south. There are reports, Colonel Sheflet, of the IDF dropping leaflets in Arabic, cautioning people, though, in Khan Yunis about possible military operations. The IDF said it will conduct operations if there are military threats or targets in the area. Anything you could tell us about why these leaflets were dropped down there in the southern half of the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, so we have been calling for the civilians to move to the south, which is a safer area, because we focused first on Gaza City. Sadly, Hamas is using the whole Gaza Strip to carry out attacks against Israeli civilians. I remind everyone that over 10,000 rockets have been fired from the Gaza Strip at Israeli civilians, and this includes coming from the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And that is why we need to act wherever the terrorists are hiding and where they're carrying out their activity, and that includes the southern part of the Gaza Strip.
So where, I mean, are there plans, let me just looking forward, where it's sort of, there's been talk about safer corridors even within the south, maybe along the coast? Are there any arrangements? Because some of those people, of course, could be in, there are civilians there that could be in harm's way.
There are two corridors that we continuously show and tell the people of Gaza to use to move to that safer areas. There's a humanitarian area that has been dedicated also in the southern part, and yet Hamas does not stop itself. On the contrary, we know that it deliberately uses these civilians as its human shield. And that is why Hamas has moved also to the southern part, using these humanitarian routes and using these areas that are supposed to be safer for the civilians. But Hamas, again, is deliberately using them to carry out its strikes and plan its activity to continuously target Israelis.
All right. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, Colonel Sheflet. There are reports in Israeli media. They're talking about possible hostage deal. But I think the security aspect is whether there would be a potential pause in the fighting or in operations. You could call it a humanitarian pause or a short ceasefire. The question is what impact that could have on ongoing operations there, especially, as I said before, in North Gaza and in and around Shifa Hospital.
We have two very clear goals for this war. One is to dismantle Hamas, and two is to bring back 239 hostages that have been held in captivity by Hamas for 40 days. Babies, children, women, elderly. And we're doing everything we can in order to meet these two very important goals. I, of course, cannot get into details how we're going to do that, but we're going to do everything we can. We do understand that Hamas will use any time that they have to regroup, rearm, and we take that into consideration while carrying out our actions and while meeting in the best way our two goals.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Amnom Sheflet from the IDF International Spokesperson's Office. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News.